Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode, a very special episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, Mahin the podcaster, and I am really blessed to have two esteemed guests with me today, Sheikh Hamzah Maqbul and Sheikh Joe Bradford, two people I consider my teachers and also friends who I've gotten to know over the last several years. And the topic we are going to cover today is the topic of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. First of all, Sheikh Hamzah and Sheikh Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And I know y'all have like really busy schedules, especially as we get close to Eid and whatnot. But I know this is a topic that's been on your minds the last few weeks. So welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Barakallah fikum.
Well, fikum barakallah. So this idea, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I guess officially like a couple of weeks ago, within the Muslim community, and specifically, I want to talk about those of us who are more on I would say, the practicing variety. And I don't want to I define that kind of loosely in the sense that, those of us people who pray 5 times a day, people who don't necessarily engage in like outward open sins, people who, try to think about things from an Islamic paradigm for all their actions and their worldviews. There seems to be a kind of a split here on this issue that I was hoping to get y'all's engagement on. One side seems to have the understanding that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is something that Muslims should be celebrating because it is a win for family values, and it's something that, as Muslims living in America, that we should be on board with a movement back to family values. And it goes against the sexual degeneracy culture that has been perpetuated in the United States since the 60s. And on the other hand, you have a group of you that is more in the sense of, well, there's pros and cons with this. It's not necessarily something that we could, get behind, but we shouldn't just jump on the bandwagon, so to speak, carte blanche. There's just some things that should be critically assessed, and let's see how it plays out. So my understanding in general is that, and I preface this as I believe you two are both on the latter half of the argument, and we can kind of get into that, and there's some clarification that has to be made. We can go there, but I want to start with Sheikh Joe. And Sheikh Joe, when this ruling first took place, I think this is going back to June 24th now, and I'm going to see if I can actually share my screen because I just want to show the I don't do the share screen. There it is. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I've got a Sheikh Joe's Facebook post from June 24th, and it reads, "Gauge the commitment of your favorite Muslim leaders and how they react to this," meaning the overturning of Roe v. Wade. "Do they maintain their use of Islamic justifications which should be connected to submission to God, or simply regurgitate liberal talking points about choice and autonomy above all?" Now, I'm going to stop sharing, go back here. You can tell I don't do stuff on Zoom too often, but to go back to it, a couple of days later, I think Sheikh Joe, you made a YouTube video which kind of clarified your own position. But when this Facebook post first came out, I think what happened is that people who were in the first camp that yes, this is a win for society, really got behind you and said, and I saw posts saying that Sheikh Joe Bradford has the right position on this. Can you, first of all, explain the Facebook post first, what you intended by it, because that seems like it was misunderstood by some folks, and then we can get into a little bit about your approach, which I think was really interesting from looking at this ruling from a U.S. legal point of view.
So I'm not too familiar with the reactions to the post other than what appeared on the comments on the post. That's one of the odd things about Facebook and social media and things like that, is that sometimes you're not privy to the types of reactions that you'll see from people sharing it. And a lot of that's on me because I don't open up my friend circle on social media, private social media, as broad as many other people do. So you can see those kind of things. If there was any kind of reaction of he's right on this. Alhamdulillah, right? I'm not sure though that what I'm sensing from what you're saying is that there was a kind of a double take when people saw my video as to how they understood this post. So the post was motivated by many of the statements and posts that I had seen by people that represent themselves as public intellectuals for the Muslim community, who immediately after the overturning of Roe v. Wade switched from the vernacular of Islam allows abortions in certain situations. Islam takes into consideration benefit versus harm. Islam allows XYZ to, no woman should ever be forced to carry, and she has, full autonomy over her body. And that's a complete 180 switch, right? So all of these years, whether you're in the activist front, the political front, the religious leadership front, and you're focusing on these Islamic justifications, and then overnight, because now you're dealing with the political reality that you don't like or you don't agree with, it would seem in line with being consistent in one's morals and principles that you maintain that line of reasoning, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Whereas that was not the case. It was a complete overnight switch to, my body, my choice, type of autonomy and privacy arguments that are not rooted in an Islamic paradigm.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, I think that one of the problems for some people in contextualizing maybe this post in my video, and I wrote an article about abortion back in 2007 or 2008, something like that, very, very long time ago, about the, when does life, I think it was called when does life start or when's conception or something like that. I can't remember. It's a very reductionist, very small, musing on topic. I think that one of the problems is that people have often understood what is to be, and I can't remember what the phrase is that I used there. What did I say? Islamic?
Justifications. Do they maintain their use of Islamic justifications?
Right. So I think that sometimes there is and then I can gauge this from the comments on my YouTube video. People, Islamic justification means to them, Maulvi Saab, tell us yes or no. Right? Mm-hmm. Shaykh gave us the fatwa that this is haram. Right? So it's very monochromatic. It's very black and white. It's very, I want you, who is in the public, to tell me yes or no so that I can use your opinion and your name to fight the people that I don't like.
Right.
Not the idea of, okay, Islam, for that post, I guess just to wrap this up, that post was to say that for the sake of ideological and epistemological consistency, one should be justifying their positions through the venue of Islamic thought, pre and post overturn.
Right.
And when you see such a drastic switch, that means that Islam was a convenience before this, a lever that people were using in a political debate that wasn't necessarily, they didn't necessarily have any conviction about, right? Mm-hmm. Now, of what Islamic justifications are, there is a variance and a breadth to that.
Sure.
But I think that some people are of the opinion that no, abortion in every sense equals murder, and therefore, anybody who says anything other than that, which is, that kind of over equivalence is a very right-wing talking point, that they are somehow a liberal that's trying to destroy Islam from the ground up.
Right.
That's equally problematic, because the whole point of this and the YouTube video was that Muslims are taking on ideological fights that are not theirs. They are arguing from paradigms that they're not grounded in, and they're leveraging Islam inside those paradigms without being grounded in that either. And so we get this kufta kebab of opinion that doesn't taste good in the end because all the ingredients are messed up.
Right. And just to sum up your YouTube video, if for anyone, I would first of all recommend everyone watch it because it's not a very long video. It's about 27 minutes. It's you kind of go at it from the point of view of like Roe v. Wade originally was about right to privacy, right? And in a and the end all, and there's different ways that the United States Supreme Court or the executive branch will look at laws. And at the end of the day, the executive branch has what I call that like they have their own usul, right? Of how they interpret laws and of how they look at laws and how they put laws into place and make rulings, right? Sorry?
Perhaps you mean the judicial branch.
The judicial branch, right? The judicial branch, right? So, and then when it came and until laws are set in stone, which Roe v. Wade was never, I guess, set in stone, they have the ability to go back and look at these rulings, and as part of their job to reevaluate and see, does this merit? Does it still stand? And I guess, and I read this, you don't say it specifically, but when you have a conservative Supreme Court, they are going to look back and say, how tightly did this ruling align with the principles of the United States judiciary branch, of our usul, so to speak? And it seems like they felt like it did not. It was a little loose. And so therefore they just said, they're not banning abortion. What they did is they removed the federal ruling on Roe v. Wade and they put it back onto the states. And let's say, you states, you guys go figure it out now. It's up to you on how you do it, right? So your point was, it has nothing to do with pushing a, conservative agenda or liberal agenda, right? It's more like, hey, this ruling does not make any sense for us. It was probably pushed incorrectly. I know it's had its critics before. I actually had read that, what's her name? The lady her name's not really Roe. It's something else. But she actually became an anti-abortion activist later in life, right? But that's neither here nor there. But I want to give Sheikh Hamzah some time to kind of like share his thoughts on it. This whole issue of Roe v. Wade when it was overturned, and we had some conversations off the record as well. So I just would like to give you the stage and just let you lay out what your point of view is, so people aren't mistaken, because social media sometimes is like there's so much garbage on there and you can't really figure out someone's real points, and because we just want to make sure they assume you're not a baby killer or advocating for baby killings. Or you may be.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. Yeah, that's kind of the low attention span nature of social media, is that people really have this knee-jerk reaction to caricature a person's position. If you read very carefully, my entire point in commenting on this ruling and the legal ramifications it had, as well as cultural, societal ramifications it had, and the reaction I saw from Muslims, particularly on social media, was just to say that there's a pro-life camp and there's a pro-choice camp. Neither of them seem to be operating within any sort of model of anything grounded in the Islamic tradition. And I don't think as Muslims we belong to either of them in an intellectual sense. We don't belong to either of them as a matter of creed, nor do we belong to either of them as a matter of fiqh, nor should we belong to either of them as a matter of politics. Although if somebody wishes to invoke some sort of political expediency in supporting one or another, they may do so, but only with the explicit understanding that this is not deen, this is politics. Deen does intersect with politics, but it's not, politics are not deen. Politics are, in the best sense, in the sense of the way we idealize them, the way one person's opinion is how they should operationalize their deen, but it's not by any means a right and wrong thing. It's not a science. It's more of an art, and that's when it's done with any sort of competence. And so my take from the very beginning is that just like we should understand that it's not cool for people to like commit zina and then just delete whatever after effect is there in the womb and then go on with their life. Just like it's not cool for people to, say, hey, I want to advance my career and I want to get such and such degree. So just delete this fetus inside of the womb. Just like that's not cool. On the flip side, it's also not cool to force women to carry children to term. That the Sharia does give some sort of, some sort of allowance for them. It understands why this is going to be harmful for the mother, and it understands how that fetus is not a equivalent to a human being, and at some point doesn't have a soul yet, and how it is a tough decision, and it's not a decision to be taken lightly, or some sort of universal quote unquote right to, destroy the life that Allah Ta'ala has given the potential for in the womb of the mother. It does respect the fact that there are certain types of reasons that women will want to do that are legitimate in the Sharia. They have the right to do them, and we cannot just argue somehow that all abortion is baby killing and all abortion is haram. I myself follow the Maliki school. The Maliki school has the most stern view of abortion, but at the end of the day, it's a madhab from amongst the madhahib. So if you want to argue it from a Maliki point of view, that's fine. And you should also, in that list of things, you should also say, like we should say Ameen quietly, and we should not raise our hands more than once in the beginning of the salat, and that we should, pray with our hands down. Anyone with half a brain inside of their head will know that these are not platforms that you stand up and make a big moral like last stand. I know Sheikh Joe's from Texas, but not every issue is the Alamo that you have to like make this big dramatic last stand on. And one of the things that really has flabbergasted me throughout all of this, although I have to say that it's not completely unexpected, is how you have just legions of people who never really bothered to engage the tradition because it's the commandment of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to learn the Sharia and learn the sacred Aqidah and learn, the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and learn the Quran. Anything more than reading Nurani Qaida and having like a khatan party when you're 7 years old, an Amin party, from your parents, and which your pupo and chacha give you like $5 notes or whatever. Anything beyond that they're getting up and just mouthing off about stuff they really don't know, they really don't understand, and why it's there's this emotional argument. Abortion is baby killing. Killing is haram. Babies are cute, so that should be even more haram. And all of a sudden, you no longer align with this one political argument. Therefore, you're also a baby killer, and you must be somehow a sellout and getting liberal, whatever, some sort of backing or support from liberals, or be afraid of liberals or whatever. And the fact of the matter is, look, I'm a Muslim. I'm a Maulana Sahib. I graduated from madrasa. I read books that gave me my qualification that existed for centuries before anyone knew what a conservative or liberal was, or right wing or left wing. Even the origins of those references are from. I don't give a damn about any of these political considerations. I'm just telling you there's a certain set of parameters, rational parameters, in which discussions can take place, and these discussions are way outside of any of those bounds, but they do seem to conveniently align with the political agendas of groups that neither care for you nor care for me. And I just see, something is not, something doesn't smell right here.
Mm-hmm. So Sheikh Hamzah, the one thing I would say is, I don't know that anyone is advocating for unrestricted ban on abortion. Everyone that I've spoken to, when I've engaged with people see their posts on social media or listen to their viewpoints on their videos, everyone understands that there are ample reasons to terminate a pregnancy for mother's health as the one that keeps being brought up. And mother's health issues aren't necessarily like once in a blue moon. They are fairly, as someone who's married to an obstetrician, gynecologist, I hear about these stories a lot, right? So I'm not sure that I would characterize the those brothers as people who were advocating, like, because no one, I have actually heard anyone even advocating for like the Maliki view, like using the Maliki view as their proof for anything, that there's no abortion period. What I'm hearing though is that they are saying that this is something we should be happy about because of the sexual revolution and the culture that this ruling originated out of. And they argue, and they have their data points, that the vast majority of abortions that are done in America are ones of convenience and not and not health related, which you had alluded to earlier. Your career gets in the way. Oh, I'm not ready to have this child, or I've already had enough child. I don't want to. I already had enough children. I don't want to have any more. None of which necessarily are health reasons. So I was hoping you could like elaborate, because I feel like sometimes we are talking. I don't, because honestly I haven't heard the argument that you brought up, that people are saying no abortion period, at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Look, there's an entire gradient of people out there saying an entire number of things, and they're actually shifting goalposts. So people who get caught on, talking about things they don't know about will then switch. But I do think that there are a number of people who conflate, for example, the idea that abortion should be permissible in order to save the life of a mother, or that there are reasonable reasons that a woman should be allowed to have an abortion. And then if you overlay these conflations, right? Okay. Like there are more health reasons than just saving someone's life. And there are more reasons that abortion is not is permitted in, amongst great mashayikh of the Sharia, other than just health reasons. And then overlay that on top of what the actual laws that are out there are, to say that, oh, well, we should celebrate this ruling. Like I said, if that's your political stance, go right ahead. But to somehow color it in the color of Islam, and to say that people who don't agree with this, that this is a good thing, somehow don't know what they're talking about, which is how basically, very obnoxiously, a number of people are just going out there, going after people for essentially not agreeing with their political opinion on this issue. I don't see it. I don't understand it. As far as I'm concerned, like, because people who are very sensitive on this side of the scale, like on the pro-life side,
right?
Because they are people who are quote unquote religious, and people look at me and see me as a religious person. Perhaps the people who are on the pro-life side, they're so liberal in the first place that they're not going to listen to what I have to say all that much. But the noise I'm getting is from the quote unquote pro-life camp, in which a lot of people are just very deliberately conflating all manner of abortion with murder. And this is one of the reasons I myself took the time to, post a couple of YouTube videos on a playlist as well, to say, look, it's bad. Someone may have called it murder in the sense that one can understand how there's a fetus that is alive, whether the soul is in it or not. It's still alive. It's a living thing, or it's a part of a living thing, or however you want to characterize it. It's alive and you killed it. I get that. That's bad. I don't want to do it. I've never opted to abort any of my children, nor do I ever plan to. And I think it's a tragedy that anybody would ever do so for whatever reason. Something has to have gone very wrong, whether it's justified or not. Something has to have gone very wrong in some sense or another for you to get to that point. I'm not advocating people go and delete things, but this whole idea about, the vast overwhelming majority of abortions are elective, all of these things, these are, I think, basically secondary arguments on the heels of this kind of like a Chicken Little, the sky is falling type of reaction to basically people advocating, the same people who walk back their arguments a little bit, advocating that somehow that this is all just murder that's going on unchecked, and this is killing children, and invoking the ayat about, like, la taqtul awladakum, and the, idha al-ma'udatu su'ilat, and all of these things, that there's a lot of false equivalence. When you actually are trained in fiqh, you need to know what a thing is, what it might be, what it resembles, what it doesn't resemble, and what it definitely isn't. And there are too many bridges here that people are using the text of the Quran and Sunnah, using the text of fiqh in order to make something which is essentially a political issue into an aqidah issue and going after one another at that, like at that level, whereas it's actually more complicated. And I have to say this, I'm sorry to ramble on. I want to hear from Sheikh Joe as well. I have to say this, that there's this also mentality amongst these types of people that just because we see some quote unquote woke activists, woke or haram type activists, who are admittedly, there are nutty people on that side of the spectrum as well, that we have to somehow fight it by being equally as nutty. Somehow all of a sudden nuance has become a cuss word, just like compassionate was a cuss word coined, last week. Now somehow someone saying that something is complicated and is nuanced or whatever is a cuss word. You can hold that opinion if you want to, but you're not going to really enjoy like the Sharia or fiqh, because that's kind of how those things work, is that it is a complicated issue, and you can't just blurt out, this is murder, this is killing, this is this is that. It's complicated.
Sheikh Joe, when you hear this, the other side, the side that we're discussing, where the folks believe it's kind of more or less, hey, this is murder, and they are pushing for this kind of, that they were happy with this move. What do you, at the end of the day, where do you think they're coming from, though? Because if we let's say we want to assume good of our brothers, right, which we should, what's their intent here? Because I don't necessarily see an intent equivocally across the board. Like, some of them may have political allegiances, right, with the right, or want political allegiance with the right. But a lot of them just feel like, hey, this is something that our society is denigrating to a point, and this is maybe some kind of positive direction. That's kind of like my feeling as well. But I want to hear your take when you hear these brothers who seemingly have this frustration that, like, I guess they feel Sheikh Hamzah is like doesn't get it for some reason. But you haven't been targeted so much as him. But I want to get your take on, why do you think, like, what do you think they're coming from? What's the underlying motive there?
So I think that there's two motivations, but most of these discussions, or whatever you want to call them. One is, I think, and we have to have a good opinion of Muslims regardless of their level of practice, whether they lean, on a lax edge or a more stringent edge. I think we have to have a good opinion of our brothers and sisters that they want Islam to be right about things.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
They want to feel that their faith speaks to their daily lives. The problem with that is that many times, as Sheikh Hamzah had mentioned, they're not actually trained in understanding how that application happens. And so they're circumventing the process that is important to them for understanding how Islam speaks to their daily lives. So if there wasn't a space for scholars and students of knowledge and experts in their field to contextualize things for society, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never have said, "La alimahu alladhina yastanbitunahu minhu." It will be known by those who can derive those rulings therefrom, right? So when you bring something back to Allah and His Messenger, and there's no clear, there's no unequivocal text about this very specific situation, then you look at holistically at the corpus, and then there are tools for understanding that corpus. And it's an interesting phenomenon, and it in of itself has ideological underpinnings that would probably strike many people as offensive to even mention, but I'll mention them.
Okay.
And that is that like Sheikh Saleh Fawzan had said once in some marginalia on Khatib al-Baghdadi, rahimahullah. He has this book called the Faqih wal-Mutafaqih. So the jurist and the aspiring jurist. And basically he's laying out for us kind of what has been the tradition of judicial and juridical derivation, amongst Muslim jurists and muftis and things like that. And so there is at one point where there's a quote from a modern scholar, Sheikh Salih Fawzan of Saudi Arabia, where he says, that there has been a tradition of scholars taking from the scholars that came before them and learning the means for applying these rulings in each context. And that when a person goes out of that rubric, goes outside of that rubric, they are not following in the tradition of the scholars of Islam. They are following in the tradition of the Khawarij. Because what did the Khawarij do? And to emphasize this, I'm not calling anyone a Khariji, right? I'm just saying that there is ideological overlap at times by jumping the nusus, jumping the texts of Islam to try and sloganeer for Islam, which is essentially what the Khawarij did, right? La hukma illa lillah. There's no ruling except for Allah. Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, kalimatu haqqin uridu biha al-batil. This is a true word that falseness was used, that was intended by, right? So the idea that we're somehow going to reach a conclusion that is more Islamic than the scholars trained in the Islamic sciences is quite contradictory. And this has been my challenge to many of those people in the past. Stop complaining about scholars and go become a scholar yourself and then tell us what the right ruling is.
Okay.
There's always this, okay, Sheikh Hamzah doesn't know, Sheikh Abdullah doesn't know, Sheikh Abu Bakr doesn't know, Sheikh Ahmed doesn't know, I'm just naming names, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
This Sheikh doesn't know, this Sheikh doesn't know, this Sheikh, but who, are, mashallah, an IT guy. No, just to my IT brothers, mashallah. Great work.
Right.
But in their areas. So I think that there is a want and a desire for Muslims that lean liberal or lean conservative to want Islam to be true, but they're going about that in the wrong sense. Why are they going about that in the wrong sense? And this is, I believe, where what Sheikh Hamzah was just mentioning now about, say, political allegiances. I don't believe that people realize how pernicious politics has become, where it has essentially been raised to the level of Aqidah. We just celebrated the holy Eid of 4th July. Well, we didn't celebrate, but some people did. And if you look at how some people celebrate that, we used to have, regional religions, ethno-based religions. Now we have nation-state-based religions. And there's this book called The Lies That My Teacher Told Me about, historical mistruths in public schools. And the author in there lays out, 4 determining factors for what something goes from a historical truth to a religious belief. Mm-hmm. So I don't recall those off the top of my head, but I think everybody should go back and look at that. And essentially what we're caught up in is trying to use Islam as a tool for someone else's political, pseudo-ideological, pseudo-aqidah-based debate. That does not give Islam supremacy. Because the idea, and you pointed out this in the beginning, the idea of the way that American law is set up, and this is what Alito in his, in the draft that was leaked about Roe v. Wade, this is essentially what Alito was saying. Alito says, we have our own usul, we have our own fundamentals. Our fundamentals are, we take from the Anglo-American experience as a culture. If we don't find it there, we codify it into law through legislation by one of 2 means. Either at the level of Congress, so it's representative of all of the states, or at the level of the state, which is then challenged and then ratified or verified by the Supreme Court as valid, which can then be adopted by other states, right? But if you think about it, ideologically, all of this goes back to the human endeavor. It all goes back to a materialist, enlightenment-based idea of the human soul being the ultimate determinant of what is true and proper, which is not our ideology as Muslims. And it is improper, regardless of whether we end up at the far right or the far left. The process is important, which is why, about the tafsir of the Quran, it's narrated from Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and many of the scholars, after the generation of the companion, من تكلم في القرآن بغير علم فأصاب فقد أخطأ. Whoever speaks about the Quran without knowledge and is correcting what he said is still wrong, because the process was not followed, right? So for us as Muslims, we want Islam to be true, right? We want to think that our Islam speaks to the modern world, but we're not being cognizant of the fact that when we do so, we're simply using Islam as a fulcrum. We're being weaponized in cultural, political, and ideological wars that do not give predominance to the idea of Islam and Muslims having a place in society. So, Alito's opinion was this whole process didn't mesh with what we know in our usul, in the fundamentals of our legal system. And therefore, we're going to send it back to the beginning and let the states work it out, because that's how our process works.
Mm-hmm.
For us as Muslims, we have certain absolutes that are found in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, in the ijma'at, the consensus of the scholars of the Ummah, in the valid qiyas that comes from those things, right? And in between those two, right? We have أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. The hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir. الحلال بين والحرام بين. The halal is clear, the haram is clear. Between the two are ambiguous matters that not many people know of, which means there are some, right? So my whole thrust about this whole thing has been, it is a cultural war that we're trying to participate in, and in the end of the day, there's not going to be any ghanima or fay for us at the end of this cultural war.
Sure. I wanted to comment. So I don't necessarily agree. So I want to say the framing of this seems to be that there's it's laity that are pushing the views, and there are laity that are coming after. That's something I want to get into, because I am one thing that I've always been a proponent of is lay persons should not be attacking people of knowledge, not even criticizing people of knowledge on public platforms. That's just my take. To me, it's like, number one, you haven't studied, and even if your sheikh disagrees with that sheikh, go get your sheikh to debate him. Don't you yourself insert yourself. You know what I mean? But what is happening though is, I don't think these brothers are coming out of nowhere. There are people of knowledge who articulate the side. I'm not going to mention who says this, but one of the someone who would be considered someone from the people of knowledge would say in North America, the striking down of Roe is the right decision, morally and legally, from an Islamic perspective. Ignore the usual knee-jerk emotional reactions, as well as the common talking points of Islam isn't pro-life or pro-choice, Muslims will now be stripped of rights, etc., etc. Right? So some of these comments aren't coming from lay people on Twitter or Facebook who are in their 20s, who are just maybe just read a couple books here and there. These are so many people who are studied. Many have done PhDs or in doing PhDs, or studied in madaris in various seminaries, right? That's where I think it's kind of and we're trying to bridge a gap. And I feel like you guys are both agree. I feel like on this issue, I feel like everyone is in agreement about what the Islamic position is. There's no debate there, right? And the nuances and the differences in fiqh versus madhab, right? Everyone is on the same page on that, and I think that's where the thing that we're misaligned on is really what is the end result of this goal? What are we going to get out of this ruling, right? And I think that's where, even though Shaykhs who are promoting that view, I think they believe that it's a better cultural societal move.
So I think that this is an issue of framing,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
And there have been some who have framed it through this, like that statement. I would disagree with that statement in the sense that this is the right move legally. If I'm
Right.
speaking in my role as a person involved in the Islamic legal process, then the whole process is immaterial, right? So yes, in legal, the right opinion legally from an Islamic standpoint, that to me that's a contradiction in terms. But I could take that up with that person that had said that. But I think what's happening is that if you're making a statement about the, if you're saying I'm happy with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, right? The question is why? Why are you framing that? How are you framing that? Are you framing that in that, killing is wrong, and going into essentially platitudes about that issue, about the individual issue, or are you saying that, I'm happy that it was overturned because it creates an intellectual challenge in American society for people to reevaluate what it is that they actually believe in, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that challenges their personal aqidah about life, sanctity of life, and most importantly, the purpose of life, right?
Right.
How is this leading them back to Allah? How is this bringing them closer to Allah? And, maybe they intend, some of the scholars and students who have said this, and I consider myself a student in all of this, have said that, have intended that, and maybe it wasn't expressed as such. But I don't feel that the taking of sides in much of this is necessarily as productive as we want it to be. And I'll see so that we can hear from Sheikh Hamzah.
Yeah, shit comes like so. Yeah, I was kind of. I just gave an example of someone. You probably know that person. You probably have a good relationship with them. Many of these people actually. So
I know a lot of people.
Yeah. So, but so I don't.
I'm glad you didn't mention names because it allows us to discuss ideas.
Right.
And look, that's the whole point that I've been trying to push. And I don't want to speak on Sheikh Joe's behalf, but perhaps also he agrees with, which is at the end of the day, things are being discussed as if it's a Islam right or wrong issue, and it's not. It's a marvelously complex issue, and it boils down to politics. Whether you think the overturning of Roe versus Wade is a big win for Islam, or it's not, or it's the quote unquote morally right thing to do or not. That you've gotten into enough gray area there that I don't think you can make a definitive judgment. And if anyone wants to debate that, I usually don't like to debate people because of my own weakness of my own learning. But if anyone wants to debate that, you're just walking into a trap, because to try to, if I have to prove that overturning Roe versus Wade is not a black and white Islamic issue, that's a very easy, it's a very easy debate to win. If you want to say my opinion is that things will be better, I'm not going to argue with you about that. If you want to say that my understanding of politics is that this is pushing things in the right direction, I'm not going to argue with you about that, because it's a relatively subjective claim. It's easy to prove, but it's, morally it's on thinner ice, in the sense that you cannot just get out there and rally the troops with it, because it's just your opinion. That's my problem. And the issue is that people are acting like it's a moral, and so I'm not deprecating people of knowledge, but people have the right to debate ideas back and forth with one another. I just frankly think it's just a very flimsy idea that this is some sort of great moral victory. And if you want to talk about centering Islam as the lens through which you look at the world, the problem is not abortion. The problem is zina. And how are you gonna, people well, look, abortion has enabled zina to happen for, for so long, and it's part of the problem. The issue with two people who are in a wrong time, in a wrong place, that are about to commit zina with one another, they're not able to think like 3 minutes into the future. How do you think they're going to think 9 months in the future? Or do you think before abortion was widely available that people didn't commit zina and children weren't born out of wedlock? If Islam is the priority, go after zina with the same zeal and write articles about zina like you do about Roe versus Wade. No one's going to do it because nobody cares. If I give a bayan about zina being haram, everybody's like, I already know it's haram. This, Maulana Saab, medieval Maulana Saab is stuck in his past and he's just blah, blah, blah. I need something relevant to my life. Okay, if you want to jump on the bandwagon and try to ride what's relevant in order to, in order to curry some people viewing what you're saying and listening to what you're saying, it's politically astute move, but intellectually it may not yield you like a bunch of fruitful outcomes. And I have to say this as well, that yes, we should have husn al-dhan of our brothers and sisters, but from my own political observation, and you can take it and leave it if you don't agree with me. If Sheikh Job, feel free to refute if you disagree with this. From my own observation, this last century has been a complete killing field for Muslims politically. It is one sentence that describes, I think, 80% of the failure of the ummah in the last century is what? Cynical people using the fervor and sincerity and gullibility of sincere Muslims in order to push their political agendas and then cut the Muslims off afterward.
I would agree completely.
This is every single country in the Muslim world is like this. Look, you have to understand alliances with the Catholic Church, alliances with the evangelicals, alliances with the left, alliances with liberals, alliances with the LGBTQ plus lobby. All of them, if you think you're going to be friends with people and we're going to hold hands and be allies till the end, that's not how they're coming at it. That's not how they're looking at it. They know what they want and they know what they want out of the alliance and they go forward, and there's a shelf life, used by date. And once that date expires, they'll reevaluate it. With us, what is it? The actual problem is zina. Zina is not going to get solved by overturning Roe versus Wade. It's destroying our society. It's going to be toxic for our children and for their children. It's a moral issue. The Catholic lobby has nothing meaningful to say about it, nor does the evangelical lobby have anything meaningful to say about it in any way that's going to in any way impact like what's going on in regular life. So to act like this is this big thing, like, oh, great day, moral victory, blah, blah, blah. In the news cycle, yeah, I think it does get a lot of attention. But if you're looking at it from a Islamic point of view, I don't even, and this is not even talking about issues in Aqidah about whether or not this is really our problem in the first place, which is an issue, which is a discussion that needs to be had and is not being had properly. But even if we were to toss that issue a little bit to the side for a little bit, even because it's a deeper issue that requires us to explore a little bit more introspectively about why we're even here and what are we trying to do. Just this idea that somehow this is a great moral victory, you're fooling yourself if you think that the society is going to move anything but just incrementally in the direction of something that more resembles what the teachings of Islam envision for a human being to live a successful life. And even that incremental move is still debatable. There's a whole other side of the story that a lot of people just don't take into consideration by saying, oh, look, well, all these states say there's an exemption for the life of the mother, and that's, you somehow wave off what is like a really big chunk of human experience, suffering and misery in the middle of that. Still may not mitigate your considerations enough to make you change your mind, but at least we should talk about, at least you should know about it, at least we should hear about it, and we're not hearing about them.
Sure. It would be remiss if I did not mention that, no one can blame Sheikh Hamzah. I'm not talking about zina. Your speech at my daughter's akika was about zina. You should remember that. Because at the end of the day,
for the record, I told him it's a happy occasion.
Yeah.
Don't have speeches. This is a bad idea. Don't do it. No, just say this.
I enjoyed it. I was like that.
I made no representations about what I'm going to talk about. So if we talk about it, we're going to talk about the dean, and that's going to go where the dean goes. So just to let you know.
I mean, no, listen, sometimes you gotta go ahead.
I want to add something to Sheikh Hamzah's point about like the Catholic lobby, the evangelical lobby, and all of the other religious lobbies. I mean, there are some religious lobbies whose own fundamentals have been changed to completely represent the opposite of what their ideologies used to, right? So now it's, now the preservation of life in some of those ideologies is used as a proof for an unfettered access to abortion, right? The complete opposite,
Can you explain why they would say that?
I don't know, and
Okay.
that's I'm assuming that has certain boundaries and justifications in, say, the reform and conservative movements in American Judaism, but it's the that's neither here nor there. The idea that, for example, the Catholic lobby, the evangelical lobby, and whomever else, why aren't they speaking about zina or making this an issue, or even in the Muslim community, is because the idea of self-autonomy is king. The idea that it is not Allah who we are acting for and abstaining for is that idea is absent, and no one would want, or any enemy of Islam would like nothing more than for Muslims to devoid their faith of Allah. This is why everybody says, mashallah, on this television show there was an Eid celebration, and on this thing there was that, on this thing was that, and it's all Eidiya and Mela and all this other stuff with no Allah, with no dhikr. And if there is dhikr, it's like Biden saying inshallah, right? So why aren't they speaking about, because those social ills are a result of the political system that views the human soul or the human desire as the paramount, the fount of all which is good and moral and acceptable. And I think until we deal with those, right, those larger issues, it's not going to get solved. But again, that means that there's going to have to be conversations that with topics that are adjacent to that many people don't find to be expedient to their careers.
Right.
And so, not only will they not speak about it, they're not going to support financially those people who would. And then they wonder why, Shaykhs, why aren't you talking about what you should be talking about? Okay, well, my kids don't eat air. I was talking with a brother yesterday. I said, unfortunately, we pin a lot on community, religious leaders in our community, imams and teachers and things like that, but we don't empower them. So the point being is that if we want to have a role in reforming society, there are bigger issues, as Sheikh Hamzah said, than just this issue of abortion, which as a medical procedure, right? Stop focusing on the idea of the medical procedure. He didn't say this, but I am. Stop focusing on this idea of the medical procedure and focus on the idea of how are you conferred rights under Islam, right? What does that mean to have a right to something? Those are the bigger debates that we have to have, and those will be the ones that are transformative to society in people understanding that their own nafs was running rampant, and it was their hawa, their rampant desires that needed to be aborted before anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So just to jump in, if you give permission.
Go ahead.
I think this is another thing that kind of bothers me a little bit. We have a lot of advocates in the Muslim community. Again, Husn al-Dhan, they're well-meaning, but they advocate some sort of like grand alliance of people of faith or something like that, because somehow the boogeyman of which is, I don't want to say boogeyman in the sense that it's not a real fear that's not going to have real consequences. The boogeyman of like a, drag queen, like teaching inappropriate things to elementary school kids. It's the specter of it is real. We see it happening in front of our eyes, but that doesn't mean somehow like this is the only problem in the world. A person is beset on all sides by manifold perils, and if you just focus on one and you lose sight of the others, you're going to get taken down all the same. So we have this group of people that thinks, shoot, if we can just ally with conservative Christians and conservative Jews, that somehow we'll make it through this like kind of scary night of abortion, no gender, 57 pronouns, all of this thing, which is a scary reality that our children are going to grow up with as being normal. And I think this is with all due respect, there are some brothers who are very intelligent actually who advocate for this, and they're even learned people. But again, my non-aqidah, non-fiqh, but political opinion and opinion as a student of history is that you have to understand where all of that liberal mindset, this thing that Sheikh Joe is talking about the sovereignty of the human desire and the pursuit of happiness somehow being itself some sort of a virtue that needs to be served. Pursuit of happiness not within a larger context, but within a selfish context. That it's a complete overreaction to the history of Europe, the abuses of the church, the excesses of the church. France is the standard holder for secularism and for anti-religious sentiment right now. Before, I would say someone could argue it's the Soviet Union, but we can talk about that example afterward if there's time, that they were even Frencher than the French, essentially. That France, look at the lead up to the French Revolution, there was a chance that the king had that there are three estates, the commoners, the nobility, and the church. They had a chance to somehow reconcile between themselves and keep their old ancient way of life together in a way that all three groups could survive. Okay. And what happened? All the clergy had to do is to look at the teachings of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, look at the teachings of Christ, may the peace and blessing of God be upon him, who loved the poor and who enjoined people to care for the poor and the weak and the downtrodden, and who told his disciples, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, that the way you treat me will be judged by the way that you treat the least of the people, the most worthless of the people in the eyes of the people. All they had to do is, hey, why don't you lighten the taxes and like ease up on them? And what did they do? They just doubled down and sided with the nobility. And what ended up happening? The French threw both of them out the window. Now, it was a severe overreaction, but you have to understand, ideologically, they have nothing to offer. The Catholic Church has some great critiques of modernism. Why? Because they're salty that modernity has unseated them from absolute theocratic power over Europe. But they have no alternative. All they can do is pick at each other. And this is part of a bigger, and Russia was the same way. Russian people were very devout people. The church offered them nothing under basically the most gross medieval what you call feudal life that basically the majority of Russians lived. Of course, they're going to overthrow the church with the nobility and usher in this like crazy secular, godless, state and way of being. And yeah, the church can push back against them, but they don't have anything to offer because they don't have a Sharia. Allah Ta'ala never told them how to live their lives. Allah Ta'ala never told them how to manage these things. This whole subtlety and nuance and this and that, it was never part of their tradition in the first place. Why is it that we have our people who are seeing somehow the groups of people who fought with each other and made these problems in the first place? Essentially, what's wrong with America? What's wrong with America is you have a choice. Either you can recycle your aluminum cans and accept 57 genders, or you can, somehow think that marriage is between a man and a woman, and to hell with the air and with the water and with recycling and with global warming and any of those things. And the normal Americans are stuck between these two extremes, and they're like, what the hell are we going to do? And here's Islam right in the middle, telling them all of those things that they always believed anyway. And making a cohesive system which they can plug in all these things that make sense anyway to them, and not only do that, but then go somewhere further, go somewhere higher with themselves spiritually, morally, and culturally as a society. They can realize something higher. And why is it that our guys are like, nah, let's just not do that. Let's just cast lot in with one of these two camps of crazies, because they're already there, and who's going to do all that work?
Right. There's a question. So I completely agree with your earlier sentiment that abortions is not a solution. Like for reducing zina, and I haven't heard that really argument being made. Although I've heard some people mention that. I think there was a sign at some pro-abortion protest where some lady was like, moratorium on having sex until Roe v. Wade is until this ban is overturned. And I'm just like, most likely this lady's, and it's a protest in a blue state, so abortion's going to stay legal there. That's a flavor of the month. It's some virtue signaling, and in a month when she's thirsty for some D, she's gonna like, whatever. It's like no harm, no foul for her. There's no skin in the game there, and I just don't see. And a society that's as morally decrepit sexually is our society today, something like that isn't going to stick. So I agree with you there that that's where that to say that it's going to reduce or present some roadblock for zina that make people think twice, because like you said, at the end of the day, people are making the decision like your hormones kick in, you're gonna just you're thinking instant gratification. You're not thinking like 9 months down the road, right? However, the argument that I feel finding many making, which is hard to like go against, in my opinion, is that there will be the fact that there's a sheer reduction in abortions is the saving of lives, right? Because what they believe that this law, the overturning, is going to do is put more of an onus on medical procedure justification or health exceptions, and reduce the amount of like abortions that are done for no reason or convenience. The numbers, we don't know what the numbers are. I mean, there's the Guttmacher Institute from like 2004 has some study with some numbers, but how do we rationalize against that point of view? Granted, there's also a problem of, without, and I'm sure you'll get to it, of you have all these new babies now coming to the system, and how do we deal with it? But at the end of the day, shouldn't just saving the lives of the child be the first priority? And that's what they're saying. That is the net benefit that they're seeing with this overturning.
So I think the stats are important to know. Mm-hmm. I'd really like to hear from medical experts about that, and people that research sexual health. I'm familiar with the Guttmacher, is it?
The Guttmacher, which is I think a pro-abortion. I think they're like a think tank or some kind of like policy health.
So they have done some of the statistical.
No, Guttmacher is actually pro-choice.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
But they have done some of the statistical work, right?
Right.
So, but that said, I recall recently in an online interaction that someone challenged me with some of those stats to say that, well, that many of the elective abortions are being done in the span of 6 to 8 weeks, which number one, the majority of them are now chemical abortions because the nature of abortion as a procedure in the United States has changed.
Right.
And number two, that it's happening within the window that, while disliked, is within the realm of what is permitted under the Sharia, right? So going into those types of far'i type of minutia based debates, I'm not sure the utility of that, simply because regardless of where society goes, right? Regardless of whether we have throngs of people who are suffering psychologically from having aborted children or had to experience that in their family, or we have throngs of people who are the children of zina and are now growing up with that psychological trauma as well. Because let's not act like neither of those two things are traumatic. right?
Right. Yep.
Children growing up without parents, whether because of zina or some other, is traumatic. And women, making these sacrifices, and I don't mean that sacrifice in the value based sense, but making sacrifices for career, etc., and performing a procedure like abortion, right? Any medical procedure is going to have some associated trauma and repercussions. And the idea that it's not, to me, is just ridiculous, just from a empirical sense,
Sure.
right? Where are we positioned as a community for helping heal the emotional, psychological, spiritual fallout of either of these two choices, right? So, in the end of the day, our wadifa, our whole, function as a community, as Sheikh Hamzah pointed out, is what are we offering people in between those two extremes that can allow them to say, okay, I recognize that there are reasons in where this is valid, also where it is not valid, right? And my choices are informed by more than just my human design.
Right. I would say that if we're going to tackle this issue from a point of view of, let's say, the latter, that we want to reduce the amount of abortions. Let's say we're aligned on that. What are we going to do about that? Because I don't think, yes, we can talk about zina, but let's take the reality of the situation today. Like, people in America are gonna keep having sex outside of marriage. Would y'all be okay with, because I spoke, one thing my wife was telling me is that having access to contraceptives would greatly reduce the amount of abortions. The problem is that many of the underprivileged class cannot access contraceptives, and in many of those cases, it's easier for them to get an abortion than to actually get contraceptives.
The thing, Maheen, you have to look at things not by symptom or by proximate causes. You have to look what's actually causing all of these things, right?
Okay.
I think, like the issue of zina, another issue that needs to be discussed is if you imagine, for example, you have to give a very gross and disgusting example. So if people have children listening or whatever, you may want to tune it out or whatever, but just to illustrate this type of short-term thinking, which characterizes people like who run corporations and things like that. If, for example, people are having sex with dogs and there's a disease that transfers from dogs to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have two types of thinking. One is like, well, maybe you should stop having, yes. And the other one is, let's just distribute a special type of condom, right?
Right.
This idea of like a condom is going to fix it. Trust me, if a person has half a brain, they can practice contraception without IUDs and without any of these things. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, right? The whole issue of azl, of coitus interruptus, it's something that was already known from them. They used to practice it as well. Even the Maliki, some of the fuqaha, Qadi Abu Bakr, took such a dim view of even most types of contraception. He even considered it, even before fertilization, to empty the womb of the seed of the man. It is itself haram and is an interruption of the process of procreation, right? The issue is what's the problem? Now we're talking, Sheikh Joe talked about, like, okay, there's going to be all of this difficulty and all of this knock-on effect on society of having this now legion of children who are basically don't have the tools to easily make from them exemplary members of society, even though many of them will, inshallah, through their struggle. But we know statistically that's not all of them, and it's a lower number than those who grow up in a household with their mother and father. The idea is just this very conception of patriarchy, not maybe in the more negative, because every word has denotation and connotation. So strip some of the connotation away. Just think, what do I mean by it? What I mean is having families where there's a husband and he's actually a husband. He's not equal and identical to the wife. There's a wife. They have a relationship with one another that's hierarchical and complementary, right? This idea has already like been jettisoned by a great number of people in our society. We have to revisit it. The idea that grandparents, that you have to keep relationship with kinship bonds, et cetera, et cetera. If the patriarchy is in place, raising of children in adverse circumstance becomes possible. If the patriarchy is overthrown and you have a husband and wife relationship that's not hierarchical, it's completely like at will, on an at will basis. No one party has a responsibility to the other, because every hierarchical relationship in the Sharia, with authority comes responsibility as well. We oftentimes like to salivate and daydream about the authority, but we never talk about what does it mean for the with regards to the responsibility. So you'll have somebody and be like, well, why is it that I have to pay for room and board for my wife, and why is it that I have to pay a mahr for her, et cetera, et cetera? It's because you have the right also that when you're not able to sustain the marriage, you have the right to unilaterally terminate it. And if a woman were to say, well, why is it that I have to like go and get a fasq from a qadi if the marriage isn't working for me, but he can walk away without having to make mashwara with anyone? It's because he paid you mahr and he's paying the rent and he's paying the bills. If he's not doing any of those things, that in and of itself is your ticket to terminate your relationship with him, because it's a hierarchical relationship and authority is not going to be vested in the person who's not fulfilling their responsibility. At any rate, now that we no longer have that model of marriage or family at all, even for a heterosexual couple, husband and wife that are lovingly married with one another, it's become damn near impossible to raise kids, right? The problem is what? Nobody wants to talk about any of these things. Nobody wants to advocate for solutions for any of these things. Nobody wants to, nobody wants to bring the children into their own homes. There are some people who do. I respect those people. If you're so pro-life or whatever you want to call it, that you go and you say, look, I'm raising like 5 children in my house that otherwise nobody else wanted to raise because we convinced the family in order to have that child. Man, I have something to learn from you. The problem is that this is not the level that any of the discussion is happening at. There's something like that, like in Saudi Arabia, for example. There are literally people, their entire like life's mission is to go and find the families of murder victims and convince them, don't retaliate, don't take qisas, don't ask for the death of the person, rather forgive them. We will ingratiate you, we will help them fulfill the diya, and we will give you whatever else it is that you lost. We'll try to make your life as whole again as possible. When you put your money where your mouth is, what happens? Beautiful things start to happen, because now you start to understand the true nature of the problem.
Right.
And you just mouth off and just, like that's it. We're in an alliance, and look, mashallah, Roe versus Wade is overturned. Like somehow like some great touchdown in the end zone of morality has been made. I don't know what to say.
At the end of the day, when people hear this little clip here, I think the problem is that someone's going to listen to that and be like, so Sheikh Hamzah, would you rather just kill the kid then? Because they themselves aren't signing up to take care of the kid, but they'd be like, yeah, but putting the kid on the street, at least he was alive. That's what they're going to say. So
I mean, that's if you want to derive from what I said that I want people to kill their kids.
Yeah.
That's just a mischaracterization of a very immature type, and I don't know what to do with people like that. At some point or another, you just have to accept the fact that not everybody is there yet intellectually. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that the way you fix problems is by addressing root causes, not by sinking all of your energy and all of your resource in just bloviating about symptoms.
Fair enough.
Is that even a reality? I think one of the problems is that a lot of what's being said on both the left and the right is not grounded in actual empirical reality, right?
Sheikh Joe, can you repeat that last sentence? Because somehow it
sure.
Your voice cut out.
I said a lot is the position that those people are taking grounded in reality. A lot of what's being, as you use the term very very aptly, bloviated about on both the left and the right, is not actually grounded in reality. It's a misrepresentation based upon an ideological slant, right? So whether it is the characterization um, of medical necessity in state laws, right, and the exemptions therefore, or it is the result of not allowing abortion, right, and and the kids growing up to well, at least the kid is alive, right? Um, Again, if you're a Muslim and if your dedication is to the precepts of Islam, where are you getting that from, right? Because the idea that conception or life starts at conception is not a wholly Islamic term, right? We have qat'i, unequivocal texts about the idea of ensoulment, happening at 121 days. Yes, some scholars based on the riwayat will talk about earlier than that, and they've all said that there's a hurma, there's a sanctity to the potential of life before the 120 days. So we're not saying that there's an unequivocal right, meaning a special option for people to exercise at their own free will before that they are neither legal nor morally responsible for. Because even if we say there's no legal responsibility, there would still be a moral responsibility depending upon their individual circumstances, right? But even with that, again, going back to what are the actual stats about when this is occurring, how it's occurring, I don't have any of that. So I'm not going to make any kind of representation about that. But again, it's an issue of framing and of paradigm.
Right.
We can bring up these rhetorical, because in the end of the day, when we're speaking Islamically, that's all they are, is rhetorical, right? And try and basically say, and this is one of the points I was going to make earlier, but I forgot to mention, is I think a lot of these arguments are saying, me too, I'm here, acknowledge me, love me. I exist, I'm part of this. And I understand that people want to be part of something larger. What's that larger that you want to be part of, right? So, so much of what is so much of what is common in Muslims in America being activists and engaged politically, or engaged in interfaith, or engaged in anything beyond themselves, very much leans hard towards acts of self-preservation more than it does acts of service to
Allah. You raised I really appreciated the point you made about sometimes what we hear in policy or in rhetoric is not reflective of reality. And I actually last night I asked my wife if she could like maybe come on the show, because she is she deals with, I would consider her to be like at least a medical expert on this, and she's in that field. And I was asking her, so I was like, hey, she had another commitment, whatever. I told her, but I got some information from her, and I was asking her about late term abortion. And do y'all remember in 2019 there was like the famous this video that went viral in the Virginia House of Delegates? Some lady named Kathy Tran, she's a delegate, an Asian woman, and they were talking about passing, and there was a back and forth, and she basically was like, yes, the bill would allow abortion to the third trimester up until birth, right? Y'all, I don't know if y'all recall that.
I don't remember the names, but I remember the issue arising.
Yeah, it went viral, and so people were like, look at what they're trying to do, the pro-choice lobby. They were advocating for killing the baby. You could literally kill the baby right before they're born, right? So when I asked my wife, so what about this late term abortion thing? And she's like, you mean like 23 weeks? I'm like 23. I'm like 36, 37. And she looks at me like, the baby's viable at 24. After 24 weeks, if there's any issues with the mom, we are going to try to deliver that baby. And then we will resuscitate that baby. We will try to have that baby try to survive at that point, right? Before 24 weeks, usually, if there's an issue with the mom and that we have to have the baby like exit, most likely that baby won't survive because we don't even have the technology to, like, for example, to give it like the nasal there's like the tubing and whatnot. It's too small to handle it. So it'll actually be torturous in that sense. But sometimes there I have been cases where 23 weeks I may survive. But it reminds me of this, like, this is all political rhetoric. And I asked her, but this politician said that. And I'm like, well, and she's like, yeah, it's all talking points because it gets some people riled up. But he's like, that's not what's happening. You're not aborting babies at 36 weeks. You know what I mean? That's just go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't read those statutes and things like that. I mean,
Right.
One that I've noticed with the debates on this on the right, we're talking politically here,
Yep.
that in many states you have people who are arguing pro-life stances that are neither versed in medicine nor in law, and they're making many ridiculous claims. And obviously that's a problem. And
Right.
again, that goes back to the problem of the system, right? Should this be a technocratic issue where you have experts opining on how this plays out, as opposed to legislators who many times are, receiving a wad of cash for something to become a bill. Let's just call it what it is.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Bills aren't by them.
Yeah. So when I looked at the Guttmacher data from 2004 that's being thrown around, the percentage, the 21 weeks and above is the furthest it'll go. It won't show anything beyond that.
Yeah.
So you don't see anything for like 30 weeks because at the end those won't exist. That's fake news. Like, they're not aborting at that time frame. There's an issue. You have the baby, you deliver.
They're not practically, but was there a push? Was there a push to allow that under the law for somebody who says, 8 months, 9 months, I'm still,
Right, but I'm not sure if there's a case. Like, I don't. It seems to me that there aren't physicians who would even execute that. That they would say this is unethical, and they're not gonna like. So yes, you could argue because I was speaking. So I've got some friends who work in soft. Some of my friends who were like on this hardline pro-life stance. Some of them work in software and tech, which is like some of the wokest progressive industries out there right now, right? So they'll engage with some of their coworkers and tell me like, yeah, these leftists, they believe that you should be able to abort like the day before the actual Labor Day. Like,
So this is just pronoun pushback then.
right, you know what I mean? And so it's just like, yeah, they want, because legally, because part of the paradigm of the pro-choice movement is women should have the absolute autonomy and right to abort, right? But the reality is, after a certain point in time, they have to go to like the physician isn't going to execute that. They're just going to say, sorry, no, this baby is viable. If you don't want the baby, we can deliver the baby. We're not going to at this point execute this abortion because, like, we can mitigate. I'm sure there might be like one-off scenarios where literally they don't have time and they have to like do something quick. Like when we talk about partial birth abortions, for example, right? My wife was telling me about a case when she was in residency where at like 19 weeks, they had to, like, the woman's internal organs were shutting down. It starts with I forget. These doctors use these medical terms that I forget. It's like, starts with a C, right? Her kidneys were failing. Everything was failing. And they had like no time to like really go through like even inducing the baby out within like 12, 24 hours, right? So they had to go in there, crush the skull and pull it out, right? So that's pretty graphic. But like literally you have a situation where organs are shutting down and everyone should know what that means at the end of the day, right? So there seems to be a lot of like, yeah, so some of these scenarios are I hear about the reality of them in the sense that they do pop up. and it's not as, I guess, minor. I guess in the grand scheme of things, maybe the numbers show they are, but that's still someone's spouse. And I think Sheikh Hamzah and I, we were talking the other day about this. Is that at the end of the day, I'm in Illinois, right? Let's say my wife gets pregnant again and has some complication and has to go through with an abortion. And I would be like, hey, listen, and I know where she's coming from. I know that there's a point where the mother, if her life's at stake, I would go through with that, right? And the thing of it is, I don't know. What if you're in a situation? What if you're in a state? I don't know what Texas's laws are. They say the mom's health is obviously every state has a clause for it, right? The problem is though that in those states, we don't know what kind of scrutiny is going to have to be proven. What kind of evidence doctors are going to have show to get off the hook to
Well,
say that they were justified under scrutiny. You know what I mean?
That seems to me to be a big part of this debate, is that there are obviously liability issues that are coming up in the American legal context
Right.
that are being expressed, that are being indicated or pointed to, but not expressed out loud.
Yeah.
So people are not talking about, like, for example, I read all of the Texas statutes about,
Yep.
well as
Right.
Oklahoma, because it was claimed that it was based on Texas.
Right.
And there are all of these carve outs for all of these exceptions. However, it has to be recorded correctly, and the physician has to be on record as for the reasons. Right. So now it basically comes down to what, my question is for the legal experts out there, and by the book, not by, not by opinion, but what were the liabilities before the overturning of Roe versus Wade versus now that it's in the purview of the states?
Right.
I'm very interested to find, just as an academic exercise,
Right.
very interested to find that out, because I do believe that would be a motivating factor for whether or not people are going to, put their, and you're married to a doctor, so malpractice and lawsuits and all of that are a very real part of being a physician.
Right.
But again, that's a curiosity on my part.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of, I don't believe any of that has an effect on the hukum or the parameters for what is acceptable or unacceptable.
But I think it helps us understand like what people like, because to frame, yes, there are crazy leftists out there that really see that are heartless and they see this absolute right to choose, right? But there are like, I think there are more than enough cases where you have doctors that want to help a woman that a woman becomes pregnant, and she finds an OB, and her intent is to bring this baby to term and have a child, and then she gets an OBGYN physician, and at some point in time the OBGYN sees, let's say example of ectopic, they bring up ectopic pregnancies, right, which most places will say that this shouldn't affect. However, in some of these states, I assume you'll need some proof, and their proof might be an ultrasound. Now, here's the thing.
Well, I mean, Maheen, it's even more than that. Why?
Yeah.
Because a lot of these procedures that are for abortions, they're like identical to the procedures for evacuating the womb from miscarriage, which can be itself a very dangerous and a very harmful
Right.
process.
Right.
And so what happens is that now all these clinics are shutting down.
Right.
And do you think that every place has the same amount of access to a clinic as New York City or Los Angeles or even, Dallas, Texas or Houston or whatever? Absolutely not. So you have places where these medical services can be had, and they're going to be closed. Is everybody going to have the ability to go and fly to the next major city or drive to the next major city to take, to pay for the conveyance and the hotel when you get there and the hotel to recover in? The thing is, these are all like really, really complicated issues. And then at this, another consideration on top of it, you're talking about documentation. Man, if you're fat, the doctor is not going to treat you the same. If you don't speak English, the doctor is not going to treat you the same. If you're a particular color, the doctor is not going to treat you the same. If the doctor doesn't like whatever the hell you are or aren't, the doctor is not going to treat you the same. Anybody who's had to manage care for a loved one in a hospital has seen all of these things happen. all of these like manifold complications, which are not what a person needs to deal with when they get there. Now, just like a person can say, oh, look, I saved all these babies, right? Maybe somebody may not be excited about the overturning of Roe versus Wade, thinking about what that one time that I went through this with my wife or with my, with my sister or with my loved one. And I don't want other women to go through it as well. It's not as black and white. And the thing is that it's very interesting, the statistics thrown at each other. I feel like on one side, you have this idea that like this huge super majority of abortions are just classified as elective. And I have a hard time accepting that any woman just walks, whether her reasons for aborting a child are justified or not, just walks into a clinic and be like, yeah, like it's my choice. Let's just do it, even if her reasons are wrong. I mean, they're just immoral reasons. Still, at the end of the day, she's a woman, she's a mother. Put the law to the side for us. She knows that this is a life that literally her entire humanity is pegged to wanting what's best for it. And now she's going to herself kill it. Like and then on the flip side, what you're talking about, how many of the abortions happen so late term? They're comparatively less. It's not, if the statistics I read are the same as yours, it's more than 50% of them happen before the 120 days anyway, right?
I don't remember the exact breakdown because they're not going by 120 days, but
they're not. Yeah, they're going by whatever. But like it's in that first trimester, right? And then beyond that, how many of those pregnancies that are, or the terminations that are later than that time are because someone's like, hey, it's a day 145. I just changed my mind. Let's go get an abortion. And how many of them are because access is a problem? Knowing knowing that you're even pregnant in the first place is, it doesn't happen. Like, it's not like the moment of conception, someone sends you an email, right?
Right.
It's not like someone sends you email the moment the genome, from the in the zygote yields out some sort of genetic defect, or some sort of the developmental process yields up some sort of defect. Even then, stuff is later than what we talk about and discuss in fiqh books, or in even like law, the codification of law. Why? Because it's a human process. People just don't know. They don't have access to stuff. They don't have a car or a ride to somewhere. They don't have this. They don't have that. Is a person a baby killer just because they feel sympathy for people that may have, legitimate reasons and for doing these things, and then afterward have a hard time, getting the service they need when they need it? And is a person a baby killer for feeling sympathy for the fact that that process is going to get even harder and it's going to get stretched out even further and push people toward even more desperation? I guess if you want to believe that, go ahead. But I mean, I think there is a lot in the middle that's like kind of complicated. If you have any sort of empathy for another human being, much less for a mother, just like you have for a child, it's not that simple.
Right. And wrapping on my point on like topics is that in a state where you'd have to have an onus to prove something, in many cases, the physicians aren't going to have an x-ray to go off of, because what they'll see is the baby is outside the uterus, right? And they'll know it's an ectopic early on because of the hormone levels are going up, and they're not seeing the fetus in the uterus. So they know based on past history and experience that this is an ectopic pregnancy, and sometimes they can chemically treat it. Like Sheikh Joe mentioned, the chemical abortions, they can chemically terminate. But the question is that, and I think a lot of this is going to be just wait and see. We got to wait and see on how some of this stuff plays out, and some of these cases in some of these states that are going to go for the abortion bans, right? That's my thing. But as we wrap up here, we got about 10 minutes left. Do you guys have any closing thoughts on this issue and anything else? And what are the takeaways? If there's anything that, it's almost a 2-hour podcast. If there's, one thing that you would want someone to remember from this recording, what is it? We can start with Sheikh Joe first.
I mean, I would say that, speaking in terms of absolutes, I think we are all agreed that zina is haram. And we are all agreed that it is unacceptable to sire children through zina. And we can agree that there is a sanctity to the potential of life in the mother's womb. And we can agree that when a child has experienced, or when a fetus has experienced ensoulment, then that sanctity, as Imam al-Ghazali said, is even stronger. And that the sanctity of the life of the mother as well is an absolute. And that the Sharia has a means and a manner for balancing the benefit and the harm in weighing the sanctity of all of the related stakeholders, if you will, right? And that no one is advocating for murder, as murder is also haram. And in between all of that is the beauty of Islam and Islamic legislation, in that it operates on an economy of uncertainty that allows flexibility to deal with the circumstances of people's lives and the circumstances that their lives are willed into, to bring about a greater goal of coming close to Allah through the belief in qada wa qadar, through the belief of introspection towards Allah as the ultimate goal. And it is short-sighted to focus simply on the one minutia as the ultimate goal, when that one data point or that one point in time changes from time to place. One of the reasons why fiqh was not codified or canonized, should I say? It was codified, but it was not canonized, right? The madhahib were each of the madhahib have this inherent flexibility within certain parameters to deal with these types of situations. So when we explore outside of that, we're actually exploring something, or when we promote outside of that, we're actually promoting something which cannot be said to be inherently Islamic, even though it may have an Islamic slogan attached to it. And that's whether on the right of the political spectrum or the left of the political spectrum. So, you know, those are really my closing thoughts on the topic, and that points to us as Muslims to take our paradigm and our heritage, ideologically, legally, spiritually, much more serious than we do, and not allow ourselves to be played into the hands of enemies who, in the end of the day, will discard us, regardless of what utility we gained for them or they gained from us before that.
All right, Sheikh Hamzah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Joe, for that eloquent summary of the issues. I can't really do much better than that, except for to say on the heels of it that, look, if we believe in Islam and we think that it has solutions, then we need to be more serious in our commitment to it, not only in our personal piety, but also intellectually. And so we have, mashallah, now all of these institutions that weren't there when, you know, maybe you and I were seeking these types of answers, that you can go, you know, the Dar al-Qasim, Dar al-Salam. You have a number of places in Texas as well. You have a number of places across the country where you can learn your basic Arabic enough to understand much of the Quran and at least read its tafsir in Arabic. You can, you know, have access to a basic book of fiqh of one of the madhahib of the Sunnah. You can read basic texts in Aqidah. You can have some sort of connection with that intellectual life of Islam, which people really underestimate. And then once they see it, you know, it kind of like opens their eyes. A person who doesn't know who, you know, Fakhruddin Razi is, a person who doesn't know who Qurtubi is, who doesn't know who Hafiz ibn Hajar Asqalani, Hafiz Dhahabi, you know, Ibn al-Qayyim, and, you know, a great number of scholars, mashallah, that have a range of opinions on different spectrums, that if you don't enter into that world, you'll think that the only thing moral in the, you know, in this universe going on is Republicans versus Democrats. And it's just a real pity So, like take that time out, take a year off from your job, take a year off from your, take a gap year from your undergrad or between your undergrad and medical school or law school or whatever, make that commitment. If you can't do it, if you can't take a year off, do it part-time, but dedicate yourself in order to understanding these things. And if at the end of the day, you still come to the conclusion that, these Maulvis are just making stuff up, but you can read the books yourself, then like Sheikh Joe said, you put the answers forward, but put them with your foot on firm ground, with a foothold, on the land of Deen, of Wahi, of the revelation that came down on the noble heart of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not on the the floating ice sheet, floating and tipping ice sheet of this political party or that political party or this weird group or that weird group. And then even then we may disagree, but our disagreement, I promise, will be of much more benefit to everybody than having these kind of like little pot shot rhetorical wars with each other on Twitter.
All right, well, Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Hamzah and Sheikh Joe, for coming on and having this discussion. I hope people found it beneficial. I hope that this helps bring people together in a sense that hopefully, because I think sometimes we're again talking over each other.
Don't hold your breath.
You know what I mean? But and hopefully, if nothing else, I would, love for you guys. I mean, you all do it already. Is to have these conversations behind the scenes with the people, with the other mashayikh who may disagree with you on certain points. But I really resonated with Sheikh Hamzah's point on, listen, some things are politics, and we can, if it's a political issue, we can agree to disagree on politics. That could be a preference. There could be certain angles you're coming from. If you have some people's livelihoods are dependent on their political affiliations, for example, right? So let's not conflate that with religion, in a sense. So because I feel like at the end of the day, there isn't any disagreement on what Islam says about the pregnancy and abortion and the various fiqh. I think you guys are all on the same page there. But the framing, as Sheikh Joe mentioned, when we're framing it differently from different angles, different paradigms, then and we have certain like deep-seated desires to like maybe to I say own the libs, as sometimes we gotta check ourselves sometimes. Like, yeah, sometimes you see woke leftists and they know the hell out of you, right? And you want to see them kind of put in their place. You know what I mean? But sometimes we have to take a step back and say like, I don't know that this is is this really for because Sheikh Joe, you mentioned sometimes we're doing things for this nafsi paradigm, to like satisfy our own nafs versus really seeking the truth. So I hope that worst case, I'm sure there's going to be some social media back and forth that's going to continue, but Sheikh Hamzah, I try to give people benefit that you're like, man, it ain't happening. But hopefully y'all can at least have some discussion with the shayukh behind the scenes, and like that'll reflect hopefully with better behavior online. For our listeners, go ahead.
Can I just say one last thing
Sure.
to that?
Yeah.
I think that there's a wrong assumption in the community that those conversations don't happen. And I can tell you that there are very few people who, from my elders or peers, or even those younger than me, who refuse to engage in proactive, respectful, and challenging conversations behind closed doors. I can count them on less than one hand. Right. The people who would not want to be challenged. But for the most part, regardless of educational background, ideological adherence, perspective, political positions, these conversations are happening, and they're happening because behind closed doors, because there is a sense that that some of these topics need to be discussed in a frank manner that, quite frankly, is not productive on a social media platform. And also that anytime that we disagree, that we are not disagreeing out of a sense of spite or hatred or rancor for each other, but we are disagreeing on the basis of a perspective, as Sheikh Hamzah mentioned, which has feet which are firm on the ground of the Sharia, right? So that's the message that I think a lot of people need to walk away from. It's that just because you're not hearing the conversation does not mean that the conversation is not happening or does not happen. In fact, it happens. It does happen much more often than people want to give credence to. And I think one of the reasons why people feel that it doesn't happen is because they want to be part of the conversation. And if they want to be part of the conversation, they should be equipped for the conversation.
Exactly.
And that goes to the encouragement to continue learning, continue dedicating, time and intellectual ability, which many people have. And you will find that the breadth of and the inherent beauty of the Sharia will become much more apparent to you.
Yeah, you definitely cannot have these conversations on social media because the level of immaturity that's present, and you can't, it's not an open forum, right? And I think it makes total sense that you guys would have it off the record, because you can't introduce, like, if someone's not equipped, like you said, if they want to be a part of it, yeah, go ahead and be equipped. For listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@sultansandsneakers.com. Sheikh Hamzah Maqbul and Sheikh Joe Bradford are available on all your social media. Sheikh Hamzah famous on Twitter. I'm sure people already know where to find him. Sheikh Joe, Twitter and Instagram. You don't do much Facebook anymore, Sheikh Joe, right?
No. The UX I experience is a disaster. So
right. And then if you want to support the channel, you like what we're doing here, you can support us through patreon.com/Sultans and Sneakers. If not, you can just please follow the social media channels on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. For my special guests, Sheikh Hamzah Maqbul and Sheikh Joe Bradford, I'm your host, Mahin the Podcaster, signing off.